Now I am curious about this because
Starter
I
homes
did
are
see
disappearing.
I did see that New York passed a law to where if you want to come into New York and you're a family, it's going to cost you $8 to come in and $8 to come out. So if you're somebody that lives in New Jersey but works in New York, every day is going to cost you $16 just to get to the job. So that just seems like that's back assward logic. I don't know if that's been reversed since Trump's been in office, but New York just doomed its middle class to be homeless. Huh?
From the United States. In the early 1980s, as many as 40% of the new homes built were considered entry level. By 2023, just 9% fit the criteria.
Give it another 20 years, and literally no young person will be able to afford.
Yeah, we don't have
Isn't that the guy that makes homes?
to wait 20 years for that to happen because here in New York City, it's already happening. And while
Yeah, a lot of people are in my company are trying to switch to a home base just for this alone.
all the
Wow.
prices for entry-level homes here start
Like
at
I heard about it and didn't dig into anything more of it. So this is me digging into it, and it's crazy that it's just so it's like an octopus with its tentacles just reaching everywhere.
around $200,000 for most people. Living in these places becomes impossible after a year or two because spending that amount of money will only get you a one-room, one-person studio in most of the city, making New York a place that's quickly running out of room for most of its residents. And the worst part about this is nobody in charge seems to care if New York's middle class disappears permanently.
Manhattan real estate sales stalled for 2 years as buyers and sellers just remained too far apart on price. Now the sellers are caving. The average apartment price in Manhattan will now cost you only $2 million.
Yeah, a starter home used to be a smaller condo, a smaller space.
It's a
and
big
someone
thing
would
since
upgrade
RTO has been
maybe
affected.
after 5 years as they get married or have
I'm
a
gonna say something real dumb, Pep. I apologize. What does RTO stand for?
family and want to move. But now we're actually seeing
Regional
that most people are buying
Transportation.
their first home as a single family residence.
Rents have been steadily rising in New York City in
Return to
recent
office.
years, but incomes have not kept
God,
pace.
I'm retarded.
Median rents in New York City rose 18%.
A new survey reveals 85% of New Yorkers say the cost of food is rising faster than their
I can't understand how it was already New York and California were some of the most expensive places to live, and they're already increasing by this much too to live there.
income. Nearly half of the people surveyed say it's harder to afford groceries and find themselves cutting back on healthy stuff. Meats, poultry, fish, eggs.
There's so many acronyms, and I'm trying to learn the acronyms
Just
for my
thinking about
my
all
industry.
of the headwinds that a 30-year-old may have, like student loan debt and car loans and credit card debt, and then they have rising rent. And so it's hard to save for a down payment.
Yep, that's exactly where I'm at. It's also
So
like
if
I'm
you
supposed
thought
to
homes
save
in
for a down
America
payment or
were
invest.
overpriced, here it's newsworthy when something hits the market for under $1 million. And
Holy
what
fuck.
nobody's talking about is this unaffordability crisis. It's only going to get worse in New York because it's not just the home prices here that are forcing average people to leave the city. Literally everything in this city that has a dollar sign on it costs more here than it does anywhere else. Want milk? That'll cost you almost $10 a gallon. Deodorant?
$9.79 for a gallon of milk. I don't even drink milk, but that's insane.
Get ready to fork over $20 to not smell like the rest of the city. Speaking of smells, if you're brave enough to take the subway to work in the morning and put your life on the line, that'll cost you almost $3. All to work for a paycheck that in most cases will not cover your rent. Something 1 out of every 3 New Yorkers spend half their income on every single month, leaving folks with very few
I just feel like that's not sustainable for the state of New York, right? Like, can we agree that like something's gonna break,
opportunities
and it's not gonna be the people, it's gonna be the government.
to save anything, let alone buy a place and build wealth. Something the middle class in America has traditionally done through home ownership. You start working, buy a home, and it builds equity, increases in value, and serves as your primary residence.
And that's what it was supposed to be.
At least that's how things are supposed to work. But here, that home you bought, it's a one-room apartment for one person only. And it could technically be a primary residence, but if you get married and your life expands in any way, you'll be forced to move out of that place faster than you can say eviction, which is essentially
I will say this. I think America does need to look at the rest of the world and how like having multi-generations in one house is normalized. I think it would actually help American culture a lot. With kids having grandparents directly in the house, it also vice versa keeps the grandparents, more engaged, the family unit a little bit tighter, more niche or more like tight knit together. And I also think because of the industry that I'm in, it helps kids develop more because they get to see that their parents don't know everything and that their parents have to go to their parents for information and some backing and having a backbone. And they can also see the kids can understand death and how that happens because they get to see their grandparents at the later stage of life. Like, I think having a multi-generational house isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, are you forced to be in it financially, or are you doing it because it's like a choice?
Essentially, what's happening to New York City's working class.
I loved when I lived with my parents. They were able to learn so much. Yeah, no, I think like I think we need to the whole shift on what it is to like live with parents, to have multi-generational home. I mean, transparently, Pep, Mom and I have been talking. She's got to move out in 3 months. I got a year left in this lease. I'm trying to figure out, and she and I are trying to figure out, how can we get a house that's big enough to set up me, Lauren, potential future there. My sisters are about to leave to go to college, so theoretically it would just be my mom. I think I totally.
Being evicted from this city by a series of economic factors that none of our wealthy, progressive elite.
Why does the guard protect the NYC subway? Because there's crimes and people have lit other people on fire in the subway. Imagine you're trying to take a train and motherfucker is trying to take a GTA server and his side mission is to go light somebody on fire and he chooses you.
Think are actually a big deal. High apartment prices.
He said, I woke up wanting to play PvP today.
Who cares about that when you've got a job sitting at a desk somewhere earning hundreds of thousands in income, which you can use to buy the overpriced eggs
I think
at
it's a
our
good thing.
supermarkets without batting an eye. And if you have no desire
Or
to
compounds.
ever build a family or expand your life, living in a one-room apartment.
That's the next level, Pep, for sure. You got multi-generational homes, then you got the compound. No, that's not. If you can make that happen, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Isn't a big deal either, and you won't need that $800,000 two-bedroom we just saw a news article about. And as you're about to see, anybody who wants to own something that's bigger than a tiny shoebox apartment here, they're gonna need a way to get filthy rich.
This guy does good videos. That's crazy. This is a nice apartment, but this is a shitty apartment, right, Pep? Like from what you see in NC, from where I'm at in Georgia, this is a shitty apartment, and it's probably 3 times the amount what we pay. The thing is finding the land in a good area for sure.
Look at this place. It's like a labyrinth, and if you sleep in that bedroom and you're hungry, look at that. You can make yourself a snack right here. You got the stove and the fridge all in this one spot. That's pretty good. But renting this for $3,500 a month is way cheaper than buying it for over $800,000, which is the price of that other 2-bedroom. But this is what you
$800,000? What?
consider to be a starter home or a starter apartment. It's the right size for somebody or a couple, maybe who are starting out professionally and don't have a whole lot of stuff. And traditionally, somebody starting out in the workforce would be able to scrape together a small down payment after a few years and get something like this. But if that's no longer possible and people are paying rent their entire professional lives, that really screws up what have been the traditional ways the working class has built wealth and
that ruins the American dream is what it does.
Taken care of themselves after they retire. And certainly this dynamic of unaffordable starter homes and homes in general.
Yeah, but you have a house, not a 2-bedroom apartment.
Starter homes are disappearing from the United States. In the early 1980s, as many as 40% of the new homes built were considered entry level. By 2023, just 9% fit the criteria.
I can't speak for New York, but I can say for like California, listening to one of the guys who was running for governor, his name is Rick Caruso. He actually broke this down and was saying like the reason why there's not a lot of starter homes is purely due to laws and regulations and making it super hard for land developers and home builders to make starter homes because they needed to have like I forget the exact word that he said, but like not generational, but like you need to be able to fit a lot of families in this one area instead of one house for one family.
Give it another 20 years and literally no young person will be able to afford to purchase a home, period.
Yeah, so in New York City, you don't really have starter homes that someone starting out would be able to afford. In fact, anything that's getting purchased around here is probably getting purchased by somebody who is already of means. And the
Yeah, it's probably either that or it's a Russian oligarch who they're doing money laundering because apparently other countries like China and Russia can come over here and buy land, buy property, and take that property that takes away small amounts of demand at a time, supply, while demand is still just ever increasing.
The reason that this is such a disaster is because if you're able to own what becomes your primary residence and then sell it after a while, well, it means you'll be able to recoup what is the largest expense most people have, housing. Man, this is definitely a tight sink. This might be a starter home for some.
Bro, I know my ass couldn't fit in there. Pep, I don't think you can wash your hands in here. I think you'd have to wash one hand at a time.
Somebody who just became old enough to start washing their hands by themselves.
You'd have to go in
Look
one
at this.
hand.
My arms are stuck. But you know something? Every
And then
apartment in
twist.
this city is like this to an extent, and you can either rent something like this or
No,
you can...
not even saying not even that way. You're just a big human being.
What?
Not even trying to catch strays. Not even trying to be that. Like, this is just a small white dude. You know?
overpay to say that you own something like this. But the problem of a lack of starter homes in this country, it causes a couple of problems. The first problem, obviously, is the whole dynamic of how people build wealth through ownership instead of paying rent. But the second problem it causes is that eventually it'll push up rental prices beyond what most people can afford. And that's where we find ourselves in this city. We've now run out of affordable homes across the rental market and the sales market. And some people say things may be past the point of no return. And if you look across the street here, you can see the obvious problem here. We aren't building new buildings. All of these tiny little buildings here, they have to be replaced by the exact same thing if they ever fall down. And even though you could triple the amount of people living in each plot here if you just allow taller buildings, New York zoning laws do not allow that. And that's why most of the real estate...
Interesting. See, more zoning laws and regulations on making it harder for builders to build, what they need to build.
that you find in this city looks and feels like where we are right now. However, the lack of new construction isn't the only reason why housing prices haven't gone down to what most people can afford. Sadly, there's a much bigger monster out there that's holding many people back financially, stopping them from owning homes, and it's probably
I want to
not
talk
gonna
on that at
change
the end of the
anytime
video,
soon.
Pep. Don't let me
The
forget
premium
about
paid
that.
to buy a home has
'Cause I have a
increased
question on it.
sharply relative to renting over the past decade. The increases in home prices have also outpaced increases in wages, and the median age of the typical first-time home buyer has climbed to 38. That's up from age 29 in 1981.
So people used to buy what would be considered starter homes in their 20s, but now people are buying those same homes
I'm 30. I'm still renting.
in their 40s, essentially. Now, one recent report has the average sale price of a home in Manhattan costing $2 million, which is just an insane amount of money. Well, let's say you're able to find one for $1
Crazy.
million. Here,
We're
I found
old
one that's
men
got
now, Pep.
terrible pictures, which are shrunken down for some
Not
reason.
really, not
But look
really.
at that, $999,000. And what do you have for a monthly payment? Well, you've got a mortgage
my goal.
payment, which
That's
is going
my
to be
same
around
goal, is 2027.
$7,000 a month, and then maintenance fees, which include taxes of around $1,900 a month. $9,000 a month to experience home ownership. You could rent a home and take the other $5,000 plus a month that you're saving and invest that money somewhere else and get a return on that. Home ownership almost doesn't make sense for many people in New York right now, but because of the rental prices, neither does renting, unfortunately. Now, yes, you could drastically increase the number of starter homes here if you would build more of them. However, we don't just have restrictive zoning rules. We've got another problem. Look out this window here. Look at all these
Hell
buildings
yeah,
packed
pie.
up next to each other. There isn't any vacant land or any space to build new stuff. The only way to build here is up, and we're not allowing that for some reason. I guess we still want to be able to see the sky, which of course won't be possible if you fill up all the empty space we've got here with a bunch of skyscrapers. And if you were to do that, blocking the view of everybody that owns a home right now would devalue the price of their homes.
I hear what he's saying, but if we look at some of the cities in China, and I don't want to compare America to China, but this is something I'm actually genuinely a little bit worried about, right? So this is just, if you go to China and look at some of the major cities, they have literally like 100-story buildings that are so connected that they have bridges and streets where people are walking by. They have a whole ecosystem, a whole another ecosystem of life on top of these buildings. So I think New York could do the same exact thing. My only fear is when that happens, is that the poors will literally live on the earth, and the people of money and class will live above them, and you're gonna have like old earth and new earth, or you know what I mean? Like that's I think that is a solution for New York, but I don't know if that creates more problems than good because of the my fear of what would happen, you know. But maybe not, because you would still use the subways to travel. So I don't know.
Feeling that people who already own something now are.
But when we watch the video in China and how there's a whole city on top of skyscrapers and buildings and small businesses and parks and like sports were happening, and then you look over the edge and it's like you're playing Call of Duty and you're on Skyline. You look over the edge and there's a whole other thing at the floor and you're on top. But that's out of bounds, obviously.
Totally against the idea of newcomers to the homeownership game like me or you, which has a lot to do with why there's so much opposition to new home construction or taller buildings.
What's up, Eddie?
General.
However, New York City is so much further down the doom spiral of unaffordable home prices that it should be serving as a canary in the coal mine, so to speak, for other cities that don't want to build homes either. Only it isn't able to serve in that manner for itself for some reason.
Now, new data backs it up. Rents have been steadily rising in New York City in recent years, but incomes have not kept pace. The Fiscal Policy Institute just released a report that found that median rents in New York City rose 18% between 2019 and 2023. During that same period, incomes only grew by just over 11%.
So the only way that incomes can rise slower than rents are rising is if you have a shortage of places to rent, which is where we are right now. We're actually
supply and demand. Crazy concept. And just before he goes on any further, we got Eddie over here dropping this. If we'll say $1 million is the price of a 2-bedroom apartment or a condominium if you want to buy one, in Texas. Hold on, I gotta confirm that I'm a human, not a bot, by pressing and holding. Let's see what this is. What does this get you? For less than that, for a little, about a third, maybe a little less than half, you get all of this extra land in Texas. You get land, a pool, nice wall, backyard, nice space, right? This is $380,000. 5-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,600 square feet. Pretty damn good. In New York, this might be $3 billion.
in the worst housing crisis New York City has seen in the last like 50 years. It's crazy.
Texas on my list.
Of apartments
Texas and Tennessee are two places I can see myself
and right
living.
Now, the average upfront costs to rent something are $13,000 an amount.
I like
of
Texas
money
and I like
that
Tennessee.
Would bankrupt most people.
And what that creates is a situation where you have people who are stuck in an apartment where they might be paying too much to
But
move.
I also
or
like
where
Georgia.
they might be
Like, I don't
missing out
mind
on
where I'm
certain
at.
aspects of life. But moving from that apartment would cost so much money that they end up staying there.
And
Hell
God
yeah.
forbid you lose your security deposit when you move. Oh man, that's an extra month of rent on top of that $13,000. And then the movers, I mean, you could be paying $20,000, revealing that everyone who rents here is a prisoner to some extent.
Now, some of you might be thinking, well, if renting
It's like some weird level of like indentured servitude. It's like the life that you live is just you barely make enough to get by, but not enough to fall behind.
a bad move,
Super scary.
and if housing demand is so high, why don't I just buy every place I live in? For example, if all I can afford is a studio apartment for a couple $100,000, if I've got the money for it, I'll buy it.
Well, you could technically go and do that, but the problem is a one-room apartment might not be a place that you can live in for a very long time. And statistically, if your housing needs change within 5 years and you sell within that period, you'll lose money.
And this rule is known as the 5-year rule. But here's why it doesn't always apply, especially in overpriced markets like New York. This is a 1-room, 1-bathroom apartment. It's a studio, and it costs almost $500,000. And if you look down here, the last recorded closing was back in 2016 for around the same price, which is what it's selling for today.
Whoever bought this thing 9 years ago is gonna lose money on it. And even if they sell it for the exact same price, they still have to pay the broker's commission. They have all the costs of owning it, the carrying costs.
And if the home you buy here doesn't go up in value, that could blow up all of your plans for financial freedom and wealth building for sure.
But losing money on your primary
Yeah.
residence, if that's the worst thing that happens to you in New York, consider yourself lucky, because now prices are so high that even buying the things that are supposed to go in the apartment and keep you alive while you live here is becoming impossible. for most people.
Oh my god. Only one at a time. You have diapers that are behind fucking locked things so people don't come in here and steal it.
This is crazy. $2.49 for the basic Walgreens water brand. That is crazy.
But it's not just Walgreens. Every store here that sells anything has prices that are much higher than most people expect. And in fact, they're so high that many people are having problems feeding themselves. And food insecurity is a real deal here when people are also trying to pay their overpriced rents.
85% of New Yorkers say the cost of food
To be fair, Walgreens
is
is
rising
expensive.
faster than their income.
That is very fair, Pep. You often don't go to Walgreens to try to find a deal. You're going to Walgreens because you're on vacation. You forgot something. You're like, shit, now I got to go to Walgreens and pick something up.
Nearly half of the people surveyed say it's harder to afford groceries and find themselves cutting back on healthy stuff.
You know something? This sounds just like
Same
the
with
housing
CVS.
market. 85% of New Yorkers report that the costs to buy food are rising way faster than they can afford. With things like cereals and baking products being 26% more expensive than
$8.49 for some Lucky Charms. Yo, this Lucky Charms better come with the best, most beautiful karma in the world for it to be worth that much.
they were in 18. Milk and eggs, those are up 25%. Fruits and vegetables, those are up 17%. And astronomical grocery prices are just another way the middle class here is being squeezed and forced out of this city. Basic apartments, those cost too much. Basic foods at the grocery store, those also cost too much. Now, food prices are rising due to factors that are related to the production of the very foods we're consuming, yes. But that's not the only reason prices are high in a city like New York. You've got other issues like theft, which causes a lot of stuff to get stolen. And if people are stealing their groceries instead of paying for them,
Wild take. Theft increases the amount of shit that gets stolen. Crazy take.
that's just gonna jack up prices. And 93% of grocers said they were shoplifted from in 2023. That's absurd. But that's not the only problem you've got in New York. You've got the high rent, you've got the high costs of labor. All of that jacks up the price that a given thing of rose oil moisturizing hand cream has to sell for. But out of control rents aren't the only problem a store like this is going to have. They've got out of control utility costs as well. Any business that uses water for any reason now has to pay more for it because of new taxes that the city charged itself and then passed along to landlords and companies like this grocery store. But it's one thing
That's gross. That's gross.
to have high rent along with a high
That's
cost for
super
obtaining
gross.
the products you want to sell in your store. At least you can account for what those are. They don't typically change on a week-by-week basis, but shoplifting, that is unpredictable. A store could be fine for a while, and then it could get hit big time, and massive amounts of products could get removed from the shelves. How on earth does a business fight that? Sure, they can fight it by adding the security guard that Trader Joe's has, but that costs money, and if a whole bunch of products get stolen, the only way to get that back is to raise the prices of everything that's still left on the shelves. And businesses here have it so bad already. We just talked about the theft. That's an astronomical problem. And the rents for stores like this, those are going up even higher because what theft
Insane.
does is it shuts down other profitable businesses in other parts of town. And the landlord that owns the place behind me right here probably has other
This is what happens when like the mentality of the community just gets brought down. Its foundation just starts eroding at its base level, at its base layer. It's like, come on, y'all.
storefronts elsewhere that are empty, and he's looking at these guys and the apartments that are upstairs, these guys right here. And what's crazy about that is most people don't realize that if their rent goes up, it's because a store that your landlord owns may have just closed, and he's dividing up what he's losing between everybody who pays him rent for something else. Now, obviously, this is a massive disaster, but what is New York City to do?
That's insane that the landlord can pass that off to the other tenants. I mean, obviously he can, but that's just crazy.
Should we start building taller buildings? Do we block out the sky so that people can now afford to have a roof over their heads? And what do you think about this whole idea of starter homes? Should those even be a thing in New York, or should those be built in areas of town that are inherently less expensive to build and create properties in to begin with? And lastly,
Probably.
what do you think about this dynamic between those who own a home and already have one and their inherent opposition to new housing construction? After all,
I also feel like New York City holds the same issue that like London has with England. Like whenever someone thinks of the United Kingdom or London, you're just thinking mostly of United Kingdom, you're just thinking of London. When New York City, all you're thinking of New York, all you think of is New York City, but they have so many other places like develop those areas as well and allow the infestation of New York to kind of settle itself out. Take some antibiotics and relax. But this apparently is what a mansion is looking like over in Texas. So this is what $2 million gets you in Texas. It gets you the FaZe Clan house. Like this is where you get a content house is basically what I'm saying. Yeah, you got the content pool, the content backyard. This is where the podcast happens. This is where the main streamer, actually, this is where the main streamer gets his gaming session in, gets out here, he works out. You know, this is where like the graphics team, you have a marketing content house. That's all I see right here. You even got Swag's Porsche out front. His girl's, Mercedes. Got to make sure you treat him right. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, then please like the video, subscribe, and if you really like it, then share it with some of your friends. My goal here is to spread a positive message while sprinkling my 2 cents on big topics like American, Indian, and world geopolitics, and even small stuff like Twitch drama and online debacles. And if you want to see it live, come join me over on Twitch. Twitch.tv/ActuallyElrod. That's where I'm going to do all my reactions, and after the reactions, that's where we get down a game. And if you're like, hey, I have a video that I want this dude to sprinkle his 2 cents on, then come over on my Discord and let me know and join the community there. And while we're at it, I have to say thank you to everybody who has made that Discord just so poppin'. I never thought I'd have a Discord that's so flowing. It's really cool to see. Shout out to you, Bobby, Omni, Demon, all of you who have been in there who are just super active. Logie, you're the man. Logie is the one who's like modding and helping run the server, so thank you, Logie. Lastly, I challenge you. I have a challenge for you. Make somebody laugh today. We all know there's enough hate and vitriol in the world. If energy is contagious like the flu, then let's spread and get everyone contagious with our positive energy, right? Not negative energy, because there's so much of that. And if we could just be a small little change in someone's day, then you never know. Maybe that's the thing that starts shifting this world to a happier, healthier, just better place. And with all of that said and done, thank you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.